What's up, everybody, and happy Thursday morning. It's your boy, the OU Flag Guy, and I hope everybody's week and weekend went well so far. Before the craziness of this week happened, prior to football season starting, I personally got the rare opportunity to have an open weekend last week and just stay home, relax, not have to go anywhere, and just really just catch up on hobbies and cleaning around the house, as well as getting to run errands and not be time constrained. At that point. I even got to treat myself to go watch Oppenheimer with my roommate Sunday evening. By the way, it's a great, great film. Highly recommend. It's one of Nolan's best films, if not his best film he's done, if you're into political discourse. I was also able to watch the Pokemon World Championships and get my Pokemon fix in, even though it's 14 hours ahead as it was held in Japan. The US almost swept this year's championships with winning the Masters and the TCG Pokemon Go and Pokemon Unite, but we unfortunately just missed out on sweeping the entire thing by not winning the video game tournament. But we didn't even have the people that were in the finals, so beggars can't be choosers. But enough small talk. Let's talk some college football. So initially, this video I have recorded multiple times. I recorded this video because the first time went really rough, and I really, really needed to redo it and edit it down a lot to the point where I just needed to trash it. The second time, I went over 20 minutes because in reality, this is almost a video essay. So I'm here again recording, third time's a charm, cutting even more content down to at least fit at least a 10 to 15-minute time frame to predict where OU is going to land in an ongoing Reddit thread as we've reached the home stretch for a user's project in the top 10. And I promised myself I would not go over 4 to 5 pages in notes total. Got to cut it off at some point, but I'm going to speed through this a lot, so bear with me. Over on Reddit, user jimbobbypaul is doing a ranking of the top 131 programs of the top 40 years until the start of college football. 40 means we begin the project at 1983. Mostly because he says, in combination with some laziness, he picked 83 because most leagues fell to FCS at that point. For reference, 1973 is the 50-year mark. His reasoning for starting this entire project in general is it dates back to 2017 when UCF did not get into the playoff despite going undefeated. And he began to ask himself, how good are teams? And is there some commonalities in a system in place so that teams aren't left out by meeting a certain threshold? For example, a 6-6 team that's facing several top 25 teams in a row is the equivalent of a 12-0 team facing several East Popcorn State teams and vice versa, while also at the same time, teams like in the G5 not being held to a fair standard and just unable to break that glass ceiling at that point. Which then the project began to bloom into something pretty incredible, and it became a series of what are some of the best programs in the top 40 years. I haven't seen a project like this take off and garner like really my interest since the Imperialism Map began or the college football belt a couple years back. It's also good to just being together, everybody gets to enjoy everybody's company, enjoy the sport in general, and not be toxic fans like you see in the forums or especially as of late recruiting. But getting back on track, his scoring criteria is the following. You gain points if you win against a team. You lose points if you lose against a team. Duh. Scoring margin is very important both for victories and defeats. The quality of opponent you play is also very important. If you play a good team, it's low risk, high reward. If you play a bad team, it's high risk, low reward, almost to catastrophic levels. Definitely some assumption that spanking a ranked team in their house nets a lot of points at that point when the game was played in the season, and just other criteria. Basically, the results on the field matter. It's not all about winning the national championship in the end, it's about consistency. Still following me? Good. How does this play to OU and me specifically? Well, obviously, OU is going to show up on the list as not to tune our own boomer sooner horn. We have a pretty dang good and consistent program over the past 40 years, and expectations should be OU should land anywhere in the top 5 unless something catastrophic top 10, what with being a blue blood and all that, and all the consistency we had. For my personal stake in it, it's just bragging rights. I'm a sucker for filling out bingo cards and bingo games, especially like Nintendo Directs, E3, and so on. So this is right up my alley to predict where OU will land. Call it a guilty pleasure of mine, especially as it's a good trip down memory lane, especially closer to the we get to kickoff of the 2023 season. As I mentioned earlier, It's essentially a video essay of what has your program done in the past on the field in the past 40 years. What is your deliverables? It's like applying for a job, essentially. Now, to be upfront, to be perfectly transparent and get it out of the way, I think OU will be number 5. I'm not going to hold that to the very end. I'm not clickbait. Ohio State, Alabama, Miami, and LSU have much better resumes and much higher deliverables due to the nature of circumstances, like being in the SEC and playing more often than not higher ranked opponents versus automatic qualifiers and bowl games. Now, keep that in mind. That was before my prediction. All this was written down prior to LSU's reveal last week, past number 10. I still believe OU is going to land at number 5. Additionally, some schools like Florida State, Clemson, Georgia, and others have had recent success, while other teams like Nebraska, USC, and Texas have fallen from a noticeable grace but shouldn't crack the top 10 due to everything at play. A lot LSU wins it every 4 years. There's more extremes for it. Again, all recorded before stuff was revealed. We are personally right in that sweet spot, with the exception of the majority of a 90s skid, specifically 1995 to 1998. We've had a lot of great consistency. We had a great head coach under Barry and Bob at that point. Not really a coincidence that we are one of the winningest programs in modern history, including wins, I honestly think, against top 25 opponents. I need to go fact check that, but you get my gist. Now, why do I think OU will land at number 5? If we're strictly speaking with on the field product, pros, we are always scheduling quality out of conference games, even if the opponents don't pan out versus others who have had traditional November FCS cupcake or G5 body bag games. This has also played into our favor as lately OU is winning against highly ranked opponents in their own house. Think Florida State, Tennessee, Ohio State in the past couple years, those type of teams. This also extends to OU appearing in many BCS and national championships games where they were playing highly ranked opponents, as well as that extending to our appearances and wins, like in the conference championship games. We also, surprise, surprise, blow out our opponents to the point that under Bob Stoops, we were criticized for running up the score. At least on the surface, this scoring system favors some type of offense versus defense, which for OU matters in the end. Because longevity matters, outside of a couple years in the 90s, OU has been relatively consistent and constantly ranked. Tail end of tail end of Barry, Bob, and Lincoln Riley resulted in some net gains as a result of that. Now, if I say pros, we also have to consider the cons. What's going to hurt OU is when we have our yearly throw up on ourselves games during the regular season or our bowl record. It's not the greatest, guys. Even though we're playing in it, we lost a lot. I also do think it's going to hurt us when we lost to opponents, as most of the time we were the ones highly ranked as well. So at some point, something is going to cancel something out. Finally, I think we started off hot in several seasons and just fell off a cliff will hurt some of us too. Think like the Schnellenberger season. Now, all that out of the side, I know I'm speeding through this. Onward to my actual prediction. Disclaimer up front. I have a separate master list of my full predictions, but because of the length of the video, I want to keep it short and sweet to the point. I'll compare notes after the fact in a part 2. I also want to say going into this, there's going to be a lot of uncertainties that will not be explained before the list is over. There's also going to be items that are going to be left off as they are very, very, very niche and not nearly as nationally relevant or remembered, such as the Superman play versus Texas, as an example. Whether we like it or not, there's a lack of NCAA to be included list that OU is on, maybe minus like the flag plant type of stuff. First, let's get into the introductory paragraph. As usually, he does an intro to your team prior to getting to the actual ranks and the fifth quarter, where it's just kind of hypotheticals and the type ups of the actual games. Obviously, it's pretty simple that he's going to start off with Boomer Sooner, as it's become a meme at this point, and how many times we can play it during the season. Being a premier program of the Big 12 in Oklahoma, the 14 conference titles won, including 6 straight, 2 natties under Bud and Bob, both winning for Barry, specifically both a natty winner and NFL Super Bowl winner, and Bob, like I said, including the coaching trees. Several notable names have come through OU. Adrian Peterson, Baker Mayfield, and Kyler Murray immediately come to mind. Story traditions with the Red River rivalry and the Horns Down, our rivalry with our friends up north in Nebraska, the lopsided OSU Bedlam mismatch, and the real play like a champion sign is located in Norman. Notable achievements over the pageantry of the team includes the 47-game win streak, 7 national championships, 7 Heisman winners, and being just one of the perennial blue bloods or royalty of college football. Of course, he's done, I wouldn't be surprised if he also pokes a little fun at us with some of our heartbreakers like Boise State and Georgia, our inability to win a playoff game right now, and just how close we have been and just come up short very, very several times. Finally, several to other schools. He's going to have to filter through a lot because you can't list them all. But OU has a number of quality award-winning NFL and unanimous All-Americans, not to mention 3 of the 4 draft picks in the 2009 draft, including, I believe, also as well, most players on an active NFL roster, or it's at least in those top areas for it. Those names would include like Gerald McCoy, Trent Williams, Jermaine Gresham, Lane Johnson, Mark Andrews, CeeDee Lamb, Joe Mixon, Samaje Perine, Jalen Hurts, and again with the number 1 draft picks with Bradford, Baker, and Kyler. Bosworth, Keith Jackson, Jamal Brown, and Orlando Brown for our unanimous All-Americans, and then Roy Williams, Ricky Dixon, and Boz. Next, he kind of goes into the stat line for the past 40 years, which is going to be the overall record, 327, 127, and 4, which is resulting in a win percentage of 0.744, winning 18 conference titles, number 1 across all conferences, and we have 50 in total, making our overall win percentage 0.725, overall wins 934, overall bro record 1517, 41 consensus All-Americans, and 194 NFL players drafted. My math may be a tiny bit off somewhere if I accidentally overlooked someone, but I believe all that is very, very correct or in the ballpark. Now, let's get it out of the way because I don't want to end on a negative. Let's start with the positive. Or let's start with the negatives first. The number 1 losing season in the past 40 years. He always starts with that of let's start with it though. It's going to be 1996. It should be pretty obvious. It was a 3-8 season. It was the first of 3 miserable years with John Blake as head coach, and it was just one of OU's very, very few misses in hiring head coaches. The only things to note that year: we beat Texas, we beat Oklahoma State. The defense in retrospect was when you look at stats was actually much better than some of Mike Stoops' defense later in the year. Yes, again, you can double check those numbers, and it turns out to be true that Mike Stoops' defense were worse than John Blake's. And we could also at least score and find the end zone. But man, did OU take some drummings in some of those games, especially against Nebraska. To OU's credit, too, we only have 4 losing seasons in total, with 2 extras being .500 teams. And I'll outright say it too. I don't think OU will have a team on the worst 25 years of the past 40 years. There's a lot worse teams and out there, and I would be floored if OU gets any of them, considering they're like 0-12, 1-11, those type of teams. For the record, for those keeping track at home as well, the other losing seasons I had, or .500 seasons, were in this order: 1997, 1998, 1995, 1992, and then honorable mention, obviously, last year, 2022, in that order. Now, the negativity side, let's focus on the positive. The top 5 seasons. This is a bit of a spoiler alert, but the top 5 are going to be teams that either won the national championship or win the running for it. My number 1 pick is going to be the 2000 team, the turn of the millennium team, signaling Oklahoma's return to prominence, reclaiming their throne of college football. 13-0, undefeated. Big Game Bob's second year, I think, in his write-up, that Red October run. It's one of the last teams to win, I think, with lack of blue chip players or not a majority of them on the team, including the head coach being our leading quarter, including current head coach of Tennessee and Heisman runner-up Josh Heupel, including the infamous "You stole our boys" Heisman. The second team is going to be 1985, the other national championship year under Barry, where after losing Troy Aikman, we started Jamel Holloway and made a run and won 1985. Besides that, the next 3 were difficult because they were all high-powered offenses, or they had something, but it just seemed a little bit, it wouldn't fit the next one. So I got a little bit stumped, but this is where my predictions are. Number 3, I went back and forth on it. I thought 2004, but I'm rolling with 2017. It's 12-2, the infamous flag plant at Ohio State. Statistically speaking, we had a lot of NFL talent on that offense, including players such as Baker Mayfield and Mandrews, for example. And I need to check, and I think they were probably the best 2-loss team. They had big W's at number 2 Ohio State versus number 11 Ohio State versus number 6 TCU versus number 11 TCU, and then unfortunately the L to number 3 Georgia in the overtime for it. Number 4, 2008, 12-2, Sammy Lane, Trent Williams, the jump around game as we blew out Texas Tech, the biggest OU Texas matchup till probably about 2021. What else can you say on it? Again, I had 2004 above just because of the only single loss coming in the national championship. But when you look at it, they didn't play a lot of highly ranked teams versus 2017 and 2008. Um, that's why I said it's a toss up. Again, number 5, it's a toss up, but I'm picking 2018 as my final one. The other teams I had again in 2004, which again, 12-1, but I felt better teams were ahead of them despite their NFL talent, was 2018, the greatest team of all time until Jason White blew his knees out. And then it just kind of went off the rails from there. And then 2019 with Kyler Murray, or 2018 with Kyler Murray. I'm sorry. Very briefly as well, the best multiple loss teams I had were from 1983, 1986, 2002, 2012, and 2013. Now, to wrap this all up, do I think any of those teams could break the top 50 best teams with and without games adjusted? Because we'll explain later, there was a slight statistical flaw that we are retroactively adding together. Absolutely. The bigger question is, can they break into the top 10? Maybe at number 10. I think the teams that have a best shot are 2000, as we played several top 5 teams back to back, and the metric seems to favor the undefeated seasons and other statistics at that. Despite how sneaky good that team is, it's just there are better historic teams in front of them that they are not going to surpass, like 2005 Texas, 1995 Nebraska, 2019 LSU, 2001 Miami, 22 Georgia. You get the gist. It's a mighty hurdle to overcome. But I'm hoping to be pleasantly surprised. Honestly, if I'm up front, I expect them to be in the middle of the pack as we are dominant. But when you take a look at the top teams, OU, I'll backtrack. If I'm up front, I expect them to be very in the middle of the pack of the Blue Bloods. As we are dominant, we take care of business. But when you take a look at the very top teams, OU isn't the best, but we're also not the worst. The stars just never seem to align with all the dominant units on both sides of the ball versus some of those great teams before. Finally, OU wraps up the 5th quarter. It's a lot of stuff like, do you think this ranking is right? What if OU won against LSU in Florida? Would we be looking at the Big 12 being the dominant conference over the SEC? What if OU had a defense in 2017 and 18? Would Bob and Riley potentially be up there already with the likes of Nick Saban? Would OU be able to land defensive 5-star recruits? Does OU claim Troy Aikman? What does the future hold for OU in the SEC? Would OU have won a few more with Marcus Dupree? That type of stuff for it. Just a lot of questions just to get discussion going. We're hitting a long time with this, but to wrap this all up in a crimson and cream colored bow, it was all but guaranteed, in my opinion, that OU will make it into the top 10, which is a notable achievement on its own, considering OU is frequently in the top program lists on notable websites, anywhere from number 5 or number 1 to number 5, depending on the time frame, including teams of the decade at around number 3. I would be floored if we were on the outside looking in, especially going into the top 5. Woo! That's 5 pages of notes I went through, and I still have a bunch of content that was cut as we hit many pages that I cut, and there's plenty of things I think he won't mention, and I left all that out. And even so, I still don't think that captures everything of note. Remember, there's going to be stuff left out because it's narrowed down to 40 years, but also too, he's doing all 131 teams. He's not going to focus solely on OU. We have a DVD set for that. Go buy from Sooner Vision. I know once the list is fully completed, I do want to invite him on one of the live streams and ask him about his rankings and ask him such questions, such as not just how it's different than the other like highly touted rankings or more consistent ones, but his overall thoughts on the full list, including if there was any surprises. Ask him general questions about his scoring, including if there was any hidden metrics that we all didn't see, a la what I alluded to earlier. An example of that I'll throw out right now is Florida State. On paper, Florida State beat a lot of highly ranked teams and should be, as of this video, ahead of us at number 3. They predict us at number 4 as a result of that. However, they played in 7 BCS games and won only 2. OU, on the other hand, played in 9 and won 4. In addition to the hidden metrics, what was his process for the tiebreakers, if any, and what did he leave out? Is there any flaws in his data sets? We already saw that one was adjusted scoring based on the amount of games played, because is it fair that some teams were punished because they play less amount versus teams later on that had to go through the playoffs when that system didn't exist, as well as with conference championship games? Concerning OU, Why did he choose the teams and the items he did in the wrap ups? What was the biggest selling point? What was the biggest point gained and the biggest points lost? And if you learned a little bit about OU that he did not before, despite being a college football junkie. As a reminder, I'm just giving you a sample of it and giving you the most important bullet point bits. You can find the link in the overall master list in the comments for this project going on. As like I said, I predict OU sometime next week at this point because I think there's going to be teams ahead of them like Michigan, Miami, and a couple others as well. But that's it, guys. Be sure to comment, rate, subscribe, like, share, and hit the bell so you know when I go live or upload a video. Be sure to watch some previous videos and live streams on the channel and give them a like as well as comments. They're great background noise if you're doing things like chores. I'll be constantly keeping up with my upload schedule in the comments, so be sure to check that. Not to mention, it will always be in flux as we get into new info daily from the team going into the 2023 season. Spread the word about the channel, guys. I have goals that I want to hit this year and really going to push some content hard and try to like broaden the horizon on some of that content so you're just not hearing me ramble the entire time. But without y'all, it's not possible. Finally, be sure to leave a comment in the description or in the comment section below. I like interacting with people. I like talking football and just anything in general. I'm a big movie, anime, video game junkie, as well as tabletop. But that's everything I have, everyone. Be on the lookout tomorrow for my video on thoughts on OU's updating their tailgating policy regarding Lindsay Street. That's it, guys. Have a great Thursday. Boomer Sooner, there's only one.